Planet Institute.
Hello, and welcome to R&D Unplugged, a podcast from the Learning Planet Institute dedicated to discussing with researchers on the impact of their work in a simple way. My name is Sharab Nastar. Today's guest is Mônica Macedo-Rouet. She's a professor of educational psychology at CY Cergy Paris Université. Welcome, Mônica.
Hi.
Mônica, your research is about the role of digital reading and education in the development of literacy among young people and adults. All right, we got that. But let me start with a completely different question. If your research had a theme song, what would it be and why?
Well, I don't know if there's a song that best represents my research, but one song that I like is The Garden of Eden, Jardin d'Éden, from MC Solar. Why? Because as most of his songs, it's a very poetic song and it can be interpreted in many different ways. But to me, the way I interpreted it is that it's a song about truth, about reporting about the world and the tension between the real world and an idealized world where everything is beautiful and perfect. And of course, it's not real. And at the end, the reporter's article is censored in the song. But still, he has hope for the real world. And to me, reading literacy is a lot about trying to determine whether what we read is true and trustworthy. And who writes it, so the reporter in the song, is very important.
Thank you. Let's discuss the background and inspiration for your research. Why did you choose your particular research topic?
My generation witnessed the invention of the World Wide Web. And reading and searching for information on the web quickly became a main activity for a lot of people, with a lot of benefits, but also challenges. For example, among the benefits, we can cite that the web brought worldwide access to libraries, to newspapers, online newspapers, to research websites. So really a lot of information that people could suddenly access within just a click. But among the challenges, there were also things like being able to read hypertexts, so non-linearly. And it brought cognitive load also to reading and effects like disorientation, not knowing where you are when you're reading a hypertext, jumping from one website to another. So my goal was to understand the impact of digital reading on comprehension, the comprehension people had of the topics, any topic, but especially the topics that we're not familiar with, like scientific topics.
You answered my following question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How does your research contribute to the issues that the world is currently facing?
Yeah, I can add that information evaluation online was in the beginning a marginal issue. When the web was created in the 90s, people just began to ask themselves what was the value of the information they were getting from these networks, from this network in particular. And now it became a critical and very complex issue for individuals, but also for the societies nowadays. It's very important to understand today how misinformation is perceived by people and what is the impact of misinformation on the cognitive processes of reading. So ultimately, what I want to do with my research is to understand how can we prepare young people to read critically and efficiently in digital environments.
What are, in layman's terms, some of the key findings from your research? We want everybody to understand them. What are they?
Well, maybe I can cite two findings with colleagues from the universities of Münster in Germany and from the University of Valencia. We did several studies on how young people, adolescents, reason about information and about what they do when they're searching for information online or getting messages online. And we could identify reasons why adolescents do not pay a lot of attention to the sources of information, which are crucial to know when you're not familiarized with the topic. It's crucial to look at the source to know whether the information is reliable. So we were able to identify that, and also the perceived benefits of source evaluation by adolescents, as well as how it develops. We found some differences according to their age. If I can complete a second key finding, I would say, is the relationship between the uses of social media and sourcing abilities, the abilities to evaluate information. With the same group of collaborators, we have found that the more kids used social networking websites for entertainment purposes, the more frequently they use them, the more they tended to be less skilled evaluators. So there are possibly some uses of social networks that are negatively related to the ability of evaluating information.
How interesting. I didn't know that. Do you have any story to share with me and with our listeners about your research directly impacting somebody's life?
Well, maybe I can cite a case from one student that I had, a master's student. She told me once she had finished her dissertation, she said, "Thank you for believing in me and for encouraging me to finish my master's," which was on digital reading and informal learning. She was actually in charge of a cultural leisure center, after-school centers, here in France, where many kids go after school. And she was not in very easy conditions to do her research work for her master's, but I encouraged her because I thought that she was brilliant and had very interesting observations about what she saw. She conducted her research where she worked, and at the end she could defend her thesis, and she became the head of the leisure center where she worked before.
Impressive. Beyond this story, how does your research translate into real-world applications or solutions? Can you provide some ways?
Yeah, there are many ways in which this research can be translated into concrete things. Understanding how people read and evaluate information online is useful to orient teachers on how to teach these subjects and train students to be more critical readers. So we try to translate the results into concrete guidelines for teachers. And this is only one example, because we can also think of other ways to reach young people directly by, for example, having social discussions in cultural centers or online in different sites, being able to participate in online forums, for example, being a guide, like a tutor for young people, but from their perspective, and not only from the researcher to them, top down.
Can you imagine the impact of your research in the era that we're in, the one of generative AI? How does your research apply or make sense of generative AI online?
I think it's complementary, because AI can help us do a lot of things more efficiently. I'm sure that it will continue to develop, and there will be better applications of AI to help us. But I don't think it's enough to rely just on AI for understanding and learning things. I think that we have to teach young people to reason by themselves at school. So the AI will not replace how they think, will just help them think better and do things more efficiently.
Let's stay a little bit on this question because it's very current and interesting. Let's now assume I'm reading online, but I'm reading a text written by an AI. How do I apply my critical thinking there by sort of understanding that this text might be not precise, but there might be hallucinations and so forth. Is there any way?
I think the first thing is to ask yourself, where does it come from? Where does this text come from? What are the sources that were used to generate this text? So in one of the first versions of ChatGPT, we could not find the sources that were used. And in some cases, we still cannot find them. And also when you asked it to generate references, for example, you got just made-up references. So it's being corrected little by little, but asking yourself where the information comes from is a very important step, I think, to start realizing and analyzing the information you get.
Let's forget about AI for a minute and stay on what you just said about the source of information. Let's assume the source of information is from a well-known person with a lot of followers on social media. Does that make it more reliable?
Not necessarily. Reputation is a cue for evaluating information, but it's not a very reliable cue because someone can, first of all, in these networks today, it's very easy to manipulate the number of stars that you get, but it does speak for something. So the thing is that people need to have several criteria to evaluate the source and not rely only on a single criteria.
In contrast, if the information comes from, let's say, a young person, an adolescent, does that make it less reliable because you would think that the person is not educated enough? Or am I understanding this well or not at all?
That's a very good question because, in fact, one very important thing to realize about evaluating information is that the value of information is contextual. So expertise is also related to some field, to some level, to some topic. Then, of course, a young person can be a reliable source on some matters. Let's suppose, for example, and even forums where you don't know who is writing can be a nice source for some things. Let's imagine that you're trying to find out whether the last version of your favorite video game is nicer than the previous one. So a web forum where people, fans of this video game, are discussing can be a good source for that. But if you're trying to find what's the best treatment for a health condition, then the web forum should not be your only source of information, and you should really try to understand who's the source behind the information.
Let's make the following exercise. Let's assume I'm a young person, I'm a teenager, and I'm hesitating in my future, my education, maybe engaging in research or not. Would you today, in 2024, try to convince me that yes, I should choose research?
In the world of today, with the challenges and the transitions that we are living, a very important thing is to be able to ask good questions before we can find the answers. And research teaches you how to build and to create good questions. And then how you can find the answers is not the only way to find the answers, but it's a good way already to start building good questions. And I think that's a good reason to do research today. We need good questions to be asked.
And why should I choose your research topic specifically? Or maybe let me rephrase. Should I choose your research topic if I'm launching into research?
There are lots of good topics to be followed in research, but digital literacy and reading literacy online is a very cool one, I find, because it's has a lot of applications and it can really be translated into educational principles if we work towards this direction. And I think that education can make a big difference in the world of today.
Can you share your thoughts on future directions or areas for further exploration in your research?
One thing that we are trying to develop, and many researchers in my area are trying to develop worldwide, is to test the findings that we have observed in previous research, previous studies on how people read and learn from the web into pedagogical principles that need to be applied and tested in a classroom setting. So involving teachers in research so that they can teach the methods and they can teach things that are meaningful to them and to their students. And we assess the efficiency and efficacy of this teaching. This is very important.
Okay, that wraps up today's episode of the R&D Unplugged podcast. I'm Shahab, your host. Thank you, Mônica. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights and expertise with us. A big thank you to all our listeners who joined us for today's episode. R&D Unplugged is a Learning Planet Institute podcast. This episode was produced by Annalena Neurohr and Shahab Nastar, with recording and editing by Jean-Marc Sevin. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can find all of our podcasts and further information about all of our activities on our website at learningplanetinstitute.org/podcast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Learning Planet Institute.